Welcome to the show. We're glad to be with you here today. I'm Ivory LaNoue, and this is Sedona Sunn. And Reynolds is having some severe technical issues today. She's trying so hard to join us, but it just couldn't happen. So we'll have Roz back with us next week. Today's topic is toxic energy environments. But before we get into that, I want to say a special hello to our listeners in Frankfurt on Main in Germany. So great to see you coming in week after week and listening, and I can see the audience there growing. So that's just makes us really happy. Thank you so much for tuning in. So Sedona and I were waiting for Roz to be able to get into the chat, into the Zoom room, and we were talking about this topic. And I thought it would be a good idea. First, I should say, when we say toxic energy environments, we're talking about, let's say, a workplace where you love the work you do, you love your clients, but the environment there, it can be a boss, it can be coworkers, can be a lot of things, are just so toxic that it's hurting you energetically. And it can also be in a family environment. Your family of origin can be a toxic energy environment. Lots of things can. So we thought we'd start with some personal experiences just to give you some examples. Do you have one ready to go, Sedona?
Well, I can definitely say I've been in work environments that I consider toxic. And my experience with them is if it's with like a coworker or something, someone who's been not very polite to me, let's just say, what I've learned is the first thing is to kind of come into myself and figure out, why is this happening to me? And then if that person seems approachable, I will actually bring it up to them. Now that's where the toxicity could either go one way or the other. So in a particular experience, a woman a coworker was experiencing a lot of trauma in her life, which I didn't know about. And so she was kind of just spewing this negative energy to not only me, but to other people. And I didn't know that she was going through all this stuff. So finally I went up to her and I said, "What's going on? Why are you treating me that way? I just wanted to share why I was late for work today," because I didn't know I was on that particular schedule. And she says, "I just have a lot going on." And I said, "Okay, but I don't deserve to be treated that way." And then the conversation just ended. So for me, I had an opportunity to be vocal and share, how that made me feel and that I deserved to be treated better. So in that particular circumstances, that person could either get more aggressive or just walk away. And she walked away. I felt good that I was able to actually share my feeling, because I would say in my life, I've just really shut down, and then I internalize all their negative energy, not even knowing that she was going through a lot in her life. So it depends on, you have to kind of weigh out the situation and who you're dealing with. I think that's the most important thing, is to look at this person. How well do you know them? Do you feel that they'll be approachable? So that was one way, was just to directly talk about it with that person.
So I would put that on a mildly toxic environment, because if you can talk it through, it's not too bad.
Well, we kind of kept our distance after that. That's another thing about toxic environments. I feel like distance or leaving a space is sometimes the best thing you need to do. Now, it depends on if this is your job and your livelihood. You may not be able to just walk out the door, and those are really toxic environments that you're focusing on. So, yeah.
Yeah, Roz, I hope can you hear me okay? Can we hear you?
Suddenly I'm here.
Oh, great. We're so glad. What a nice surprise. I want to just give you a minute to think, because what we're starting with is some personal stories of either whatever place it was, of a toxic environment. Do you want to think about it a minute?
Oh no, I got a bunch of them.
Okay, hit us with it.
I've worked so many, and also just been in so many different environments where I was working, but as a volunteer. And it just is the most fascinating thing to me, how everything starts out everybody's rolling, everybody's in a happy, mood to be there and enjoying doing what they're doing. And people just I think people start getting frustrated with whatever's happening. And in various environments, I worked a lot of office environments, a lot of retail environments. I did design work, um, dealing with clients, designing the interior of their homes, putting in decor, putting in carpeting, all different kinds of flooring, window treatments, etc. Everything always starts out okay, and then the stress starts to build for whatever the issue is. And people have different opinions about how things should be going. And fortunately, I mean, I'm the old school of, the customer is always right, whatever it is that they're wanting to do. But sometimes you just have to say to people, this isn't going to work. I remember saying to one client who was determined to install a certain type of carpeting in their home, especially in this one room with a stairway, and finally saying to this poor lady who just couldn't get it through her head that the backing on that carpet and how it was designed was not going to work. And I finally said, the problem here is that the carpet is not liquid, so we can't pour it over that spot. Because if we could, all the seams would be perfect and everything would be great. And I think it's that kind of, many times just that kind of outlook, that kind of mindset when people start, it's almost like they're creating toxicity because their mind is focused on how it is they want to do things. And then one thing leads to another. And sooner or later, of course, you have personality issues. So it just goes to reason kind of that if everybody just like would stop, listen to each other, get on the page together, it would be a lot easier.
Oh my gosh. Some of what you're saying, just both of you
You
ladies,
guys are freezing.
yeah, it's freezing, and then we're losing when it freezes, we're losing what you're saying. Back in my first job in mental health, I was just flashing back to that, was that I was working, I was young, I was 32 years old when I started there, and so excited to be in my first job in mental health. And so I was observing what was going on, but it really took me a while to realize the level of toxicity, because most of the people working there were really mentally ill. And I mean, right, with very few exceptions. And I felt like here I'm a very logical person, very reality based. And there was just some people in there who were coming up with these really out there ideas of how things should be run and what's right and what's wrong. And it got really bad to the point where one of the coworkers, I shared a room with two other case managers for the seriously mentally ill when I first started. And one of them kept coming over and massaging my shoulders. And I would say, I don't want you to do that. Like, it really was creepy. And he would, and he was a big guy, real burly. And he kept doing it. And so I told my supervisor, I said, hey, I'm not looking for this to be some big thing, but please do what you can to stop them. And then the next thing I know, like, he kept doing it. Then he was hostile toward me while he did it. And it took him doing, like, threatening to sexually assault one of the psychiatrists before they took action and got rid of that guy. And that was just the first 6 months of being there. And I was there for 7.5 years. So it got to the point where it was all male upper admin. And they were telling me that, I should make work a priority over my family, No. They were telling me they got rid of our mental health days, and we're a mental health facility. And it was a high burnout rate there. Like 7.5 years, I was a dinosaur in that place. So people were dropping like flies because of the stress. And a lot of it was the way management handled things. So I did try. I tried, I talked to people, here's what's going on, and nothing would be done. So I realized that if I didn't get out of that environment, I could be the next manager dropping like a fly. And I left. But the funny thing is, not funny, haha, funny, interesting. I went from the frying pan into the fire, but we'll talk about that later. What do you do? Like, how do you recognize, in your ladies' opinions, how do you recognize an environment that's so unhealthy for you, you can't stay, whether it's a feeling or something you observe?
So I have this theory, and I believe it's true. When you wake up in the morning, and instead of looking forward to getting up and your life and everything that's going to go on that day and everything you're going to be involved in, when you wake up in the morning and you dread to get out of bed and go to that job, okay, hello, it's too toxic. Time
Or
to
you
go.
hate your work. It could be you just hate your work too, but yes.
That's so stressful. And putting yourself in that position and then making yourself stay there. I mean, we stay for all the reasons we stay. We have numerous reasons that we're still there at the end of 6 months or a year or whatever. But the reality is, when your life has become so unenjoyable that you don't even want to get out of bed, wow, it's time to take a big look at that.
Is that what you call a clue by four?
Yeah, or like a brick hitting me in the head. Boom.
Same thing.
Brick,
clue by four, they both hurt.
I just find that I sometimes refuse to acknowledge or to see what is real. And I've had many situations where I was in that position where I woke up and instead of being happy-go-lucky, the regular me, like, hey, this is great, it's going to be a good day, it's all going to work out. I wake up and I'm going, oh, another day at wherever I am.
It's like you're being sent to prison for the day.
Yeah, yes. So I think we all have our kind of like rules of the game, rules of how we should be handling everything. And for me, that's a wake up call when I suddenly realize, gosh, I don't even want to get out of bed. I get dressed.
Whoops, you're freezing so bad I can't hear what you're saying.
So
shoot.
That does have a ring to it, like your mental health job. Uh-oh, we might have frozen again.
Let's try this.
You're frozen also.
For you, because you're freezing. Sedona, do you have thoughts on that? Like, what did you experience or feel or see that ever led you to know it's time to leave?
Well, I really agree with what Roz was saying about that waking up and you just don't want to go. I mean, that is such a pure sign, but it's not necessarily something you can just leave right away. So I did a lot of work with a therapist actually the last 6 months, and many of you have probably heard this term of red flags. And so what I started to do was define what my red flags are, like toxic environment, bullying, You know, you hear this about in schools and stuff like that. So just really getting clear on what do you not allow in your life anymore. It really has helped me a lot. And so by, you know, how sometimes you have to think of the negative before you can get to the positive, like, I don't like this, I don't like this. And then you start to realize what you do like. So by starting to write these things down, it's actually helping to clear the toxic environments. If you don't know what a toxic environment is, you are probably going to keep investing yourself into them. So the first thing is kind of like that wake up. Instead of waking up and saying, I don't want to go to work today, is start waking up asking, like, what do I want? So that's what I started to do. And I think that's actually how I came to Sedona Soul Sisters. Just, you know, Roz and Ivory invited me to come work here and do my healing work. And I think that I was in an environment, a work environment, where I was starting to feel like fatigue at work and starting to feel sick and couldn't even barely make it through a day. That was the first thing that was like, this is not right. And I called Roz. I said, where am I going in my life? She says, you're going back to Sedona. So knowing what isn't working for you, and then start writing down what is working for you. Like, what environments do you like? You know, do you like to work in a team? Do you like to work with people who collaborate? Like, just writing all these things really helped move me from a toxic environment to a really pleasant environment. So that was what was most powerful for me. It definitely in the last few months. Yeah.
And I think input, that's a really good point. Input from friends, colleagues, other people, always really helpful, because they can see things about your situation a lot of times that we can't. So, you know, having that helpful, loving input from our friends, a third party, whatever, it really is like a little kind of like mind adjustment. You're looking at it, you're thinking, oh yeah, you know, I never thought of that. So I think that's really helpful.
Roz, I think you're not seeing my chat messages. I stopped your video. I've been asking you to stop your video so the sound would be better, because that most people are listening to us. So I just went ahead and stopped your video.
I did hit my stop video.
Okay.
I don't know why it's not. Maybe not just maybe it's just not cooperating with anything.
I think so, but now your sound is better. So thank you so much. I wanted to say, I totally agree with what you both saying. And it's interesting, Roz, you said like all the reasons that we stay when we know it's toxic. And I think back on that. And for me, it's always been my love of the clients. You know, I really develop relationships with my clients in the mental health field, and I was helping them, and I knew that, and they trusted me and relied on me, and I wanted to be there for them. I didn't want to leave. But eventually, you know, you have to put yourself at a higher priority than we often do. And light workers, we tend to want to help so much that we will put ourselves too far down on the list, and then we end up suffering because our energy is affected. When you're in a toxic work environment, you're absorbing that energy into your body. It is affecting how you feel, it is affecting your health, it's affecting your spiritual work for sure. So things for me as an empath, I really have thought back on this, like, what happened? How did I know that it was becoming intolerable? Was I would feel oppressed when I'd walk in the door, like the energy from outside to inside the building was oppressive. And I would start having a lot of aching in my solar plexus, which is a major receptor of energy. And I also am so sensitive, like, to each person's emotions. And I could feel the hopelessness, the anger, the frustration, all of the negative emotions that people working there were feeling, like the system could never be fixed. And, you know, they had made their attempts to make things better and it wasn't getting better. And people who were just not healthy mentally, and that has its own energy. So that all of that would hit me, and I would find it was sort of like trying to fight my way through this heavy, dense forest. And the dense forest was the dense energy. And it wasn't densely pleasant energy, I'll tell you that. It was energy that didn't feel good. Even talking about it now, like my heart chakra hurts. So eventually I found it painful to go into work, and I found it painful to deal with certain people there because I could feel their energy, and I knew they didn't like me because I was trying to make things better. I was questioning the status quo in a nice, appropriate way, but they didn't even want you to do that. It was like, this is how we've always done things. So if you feel stuck, if you're feeling unpleasant things in your body, if you feel oppressed or depressed when you walk in the building, whether it's to a business or to your home, especially if you're living with, staying with, or spending time with people of family of origin, that can be a really hard one. A lot of people come to us and they're in that situation where it's so hard because it's somebody in their immediate family. And let's talk about that a little bit. Either of you have experience or thoughts with that? No, nobody wants to say.
It's a tough one.
It's a secret.
It's a tough one.
What about somebody who's passed on already? Because I can talk about that. I'm going to talk about my grandma, and everyone in the family will know what I'm talking about. I loved her, and she was tough. She was a German ancestry, German and English, and she was pretty emotionally distant, and really would talk about how she didn't like children. And she had 6 of her own, and I was her first grandchild. And she would say things like that. So what I did, because I didn't know as a child that I was an empath, I knew I was sensitive, and she hated that. Oh my gosh, she hated that about me. So when I visited their house, which was a lot because she lived in Maryland where we live, and I would go into their family room, and I would grab Reader's Digest books and hide behind the bar with some pillows on the floor, and I'd read all day long. I figure out of sight, out of mind, it's probably better. But interestingly, so I would avoid her. As a child, I would avoid her. And as an adult, I really didn't go visit her unless I had to for a family event, a wedding, a funeral of somebody else. But why would I want to put myself around somebody who has told me over and over they don't like me and, never shown any sign of love? So interestingly, when she passed, about a year or 2 later, she started coming through, and she's been actually super helpful from the other side. So I want to put that out there. There's, help here. But as an adult, when it's somebody in your family, doesn't mean you need to keep subjecting yourself to the toxicity. There comes a point, there's an argument going on online about this all the time. You know what I'm talking about, ladies. Some people are like, you should never cut your family out of your life. You should always be willing, try. And then others like, I just had enough. It was killing me. And I had to save myself by distancing. I haven't felt like it's going to kill me, and I have to go to that degree. But I do take breaks if somebody is toxic. I do that for my personal health and for my work.
Mm-hmm. I have played on those two sides as well. That story, like, you have to stay connected to your family. They're your family. They're your blood. And I have distanced myself from my family. It's not that they were so toxic. It's that I felt, like you mentioned this word, like a suppression on me, when you watch, like just a heaviness, as if I couldn't really blossom is the only way I could express that. And so I made that decision, and I've been feeling better ever since. So I think it's a personal thing that that each person has to deal with. Wishing people well, but not letting them, like, that expression when you're drowning and then someone pulls you in and then you're both drowning.
Yes.
That's not good. But if you can save yourself and jump out and, pass them just a rope or something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, have dinner with them all the time. But in one of the little videos I did recently, I talked about prayer. You can just send a prayer. I just send this prayer. And for anyone, any environment, any past boyfriends or girlfriends, that's been toxic, you can just send the prayer. But that relationship as it was is over. And I think that's the most important thing, is that relationship is not the same anymore. And that's where people kind of get stuck in staying in relationships, I think, too long. Is there something that's feeding them? But you really have to ask, what is feeding me? Is it like my insecurity that's feeding me to stay with this person? Is it my self-doubt? Is it my low self-esteem? All these things. And then when you figure out that that relationship is built on just a negative channel, then you see the toxicity. And then it's really time to look at honoring yourself. Because I've also had to break away from many relationships, just because at the time when I entered that relationship, there was something that was feeding me or that I needed from that person. And it changed. I evolved and I had to let go. So it's not easy. There's usually sadness, on both ends, whether it's family or personal relationships, because you become so connected, with the heart and stuff. But one thing that I always like to say is, this idea with cutting cords is, like, you can cut the cords of, resentment and bitterness and anger and all that stuff, but the string of love, it cannot be cut. This is what I believe in my philosophy of life, is that the string of love stays, whether you're physically connecting with that person anymore or not. You have to make the right choice for you. But that's how I like to see it, especially around relationships. And you just have to walk away feeling, like I said, there's another expression, is in some ways, don't look back, because looking back and reviewing the relationship forever, just causes more misery. There's a certain point where I have felt like I've had to mourn those relationships. But then I have to ask myself, how long do I want to mourn? And that time could be a day, it could be 5 years. It's individual. But I've learned that the less time I spend in mourning and grieving, the more time I open up to living in my joy again.
Well, I like that approach to the cord cutting very much. Roz, did you want to say something about that?
I have no idea of my camera and microphone, what they're doing.
You sound great.
But I think the other important thing that we always have to spend time and embrace is the fact that these are lessons. They're lessons. They're not etched in stone, but they are lessons for our benefit, and likely for the benefit of those around us, because we're not experiencing these things all by ourselves. So I think just acknowledging that these lessons have a value, and what is that lesson, and how does it benefit us and them, comes back to some pretty simple priorities when you get down to it. So all of which we were discussing.
Yeah,
So,
I 100% agree with all of that. Both of what you said. Let's talk a little bit in this last few minutes of the show about if somebody is in a toxic environment and they cannot extricate themselves from it, but they need to try to survive it for a period of time. I'm going to give you a couple things real quick, is put a golden bubble around yourself. And when I do this, I've actually gone into environments like I didn't know was going to be toxic, and it's a business thing. I can't just leave. So I might even in my mind put 7 golden bubbles around myself. And with each one that I put around myself, those golden bubbles of love and protection, I feel less and less of the toxicity. And that's a good stopgap measure to do when you find yourself in a position like that. Just sort of create a bubble of energetic protection around yourself. And the other thing is, put your flat palm against your solar plexus. I used to do this in management meetings because there was some really toxic people in there. I had to be in there 3 or 4 hours. And I would
Yeah.
put my left hand over my solar plexus under the table surface and take notes with my right hand. You know, you can do that as long as you need to. It just shuts it down. Either one of you have some last thoughts on this? Things people can do to get through it?
I just think we have to always hang on to the concept that do everything in love. You look for the love in every situation and try to access that aspect, because, otherwise you just make it so hard on yourself and everyone else.
Agreed. Do you want to add something to that, Sedona?
I love your bubble of light. I would also, if people know how to clean and clear their chakras, I would highly recommend that, because when you're like in, your yellow power center is really strong, it's a lot more difficult to be shaken by your external environment.
I thought of something important. So let's give a shout out to Ed, Roz's partner, Ed, who makes this amazing orgone products. So I have some right here on my desk. He makes these things, tower busters, and I actually have those in the 4 corners of my office, my bedroom, 4 corners of my house, outside 4 corners of my house, 4 corners of my property. Those break up negative energy, and you could even get like a pyramid or a couple tower busters and put them on your desk, or put them in your bedroom, 4 corners of your bedroom. Give yourself a protected space where the energy is kept clear. You've got to have some place to go to recuperate if you're in a toxic environment. Anyway, shout out to Ed because he has a website. Roz, what is his website?
Actually, I think he has more than one now, but the one for a lot of the organite is Sacred Intuitive Elements.
.com, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you can go check it out. We're all, Roz and I are stocked up on Ed's orgone, and we do have it in the store. But make sure if you're going to get orgone now, is that it's made correctly, not just to look pretty, but with the intentions and the spiritual power to do what's needed to do. Otherwise, it's a lovely paperweight. So be aware of that. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. If you have questions or comments, you can always email them to us, and that email is in the show address, the description. If you want to know more about us or our services, visit our website, SedonaSoulSisters.com. Subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss anything, and like us because it always makes us happy. Tune in next Friday when the topic is recognizing a dark attack. This is one by multiple requests, so this is gonna be a good one. In the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.
Bye-bye.